Hey everybody, this is Dylan. I continue to be moved by the amazing people in the Well Your World Facebook group. I wanted to talk today a little bit about social pressure and refer to one specific post from the group, and I also wanted to talk a little bit about a few things Dr. Lisle has said that I think relates to this in some of his recent podcasts. So let me just read this post really quickly, or I'll read some and summarize some from Chuck in the Well Your World Facebook group. He says, "Do you go along to get along? By that I mean, do you go out to restaurants or events with the non-whole food, plant-based people in your life where you scavenge to find something on the outskirts of the menu to eat, or you fill up before you go out? I'm finding that as time goes by, I'm not as happy to expend the energy to do that or be around people who do not share my values, especially ethically as well as nutritionally." And he goes on to talk about a night that he had at perhaps a friend or family birthday party at a fancy non-vegan restaurant. And how, at first everything's okay, but then everybody starts ordering, and one person asks whether the lamb is grass-fed, and the server responds by saying, "No, but the meat is massaged, so it's super tender." And then that on top of being around all the plates of dead animals, that is obviously very uncomfortable for many of us. And so Chuck goes on to say, "I'm beginning to think that I no longer want to place myself in situations where I'm going along to get along. It seems like I've been doing this for years, and I'm seriously getting tired of it. If that means losing relationships with certain people because I don't want to go to an event that includes products I consider offensive, then maybe those who are our true friends will understand, and those who do not may drift away." I think this is a really common experience for so many of us, and it kind of comes in waves. For example, we get a lot of posts in the Facebook group that are specifically about food, or people getting bored with food or trying to figure the food out. And that's very common for some of the earlier stages of making this transition, whereas what Chuck's describing here, happened much later for me. It happened after I already figured out the food, and I thought to myself, oh, this is no big deal, it's going to be a piece of cake. And then you realize how uncomfortable a certain setting is when you're at, maybe it was a family gathering that you've been to for the last 20 years, maybe it's a Thanksgiving meal or something like that, where it's always been this amazing time with all the most important people in your life, and then you realize, oh, this is actually pretty uncomfortable because it doesn't jam with your values and your principles, which have admittedly changed recently. And you start to realize that getting the food right was the easy part of this whole thing. And many of you that are watching me now that have been doing this for years may disagree and may still find that these kinds of social situations that Chuck's describing are no big deal. But the great thing about it was Chuck had like 40 comments on his post. At the end of the post he said, "I'd love to hear your experience with this." The first thing that struck me, which is something I should be getting used to by now, is that no one was rude. No one was saying, why would you feel that way? Nobody was rude. And that is just one of the magical things about the Well Your World Facebook group, because just everybody in there is so positive. The second thing that struck me was that nobody told Chuck the way that he should feel about it. Everybody shared their own experience, their own very much varied degree of either being comfortable in the situations where Chuck was uncomfortable, or being as uncomfortable or worse than the way that Chuck was feeling. And that was really special to me, just to see everybody just expressing their own way that they would deal with these situations without suggesting that anybody should necessarily agree with them. And that was amazing. For example, Terry acknowledged that it may be challenging to let some relationships fizzle out if they're more important relationships to your significant other than they are to you. This is a really good point. You can't just not show up because you don't want to, even though this particular birthday may be extremely important to your partner. And so obviously there are these nuances that are going to make dealing with this in the future very challenging. And then we had Brenda, who has been dealing with the same challenges, decided to invite all of her friends to have a get-together at her house where they were going to actually present on the topic of health and nutrition. And for anybody interested, please come. For anybody not, don't worry about it. And she actually had a really great event where a lot of people showed up, and she's decided to make it a regular thing. That's really awesome. Janice shared a story about how when she started this 7 years ago, there was almost no one like her in her friend circle, and that now, 7 years later, there are quite a few people that eat just like her, and that one person had ridiculed her for years about the way she eats and now has embraced it for the last 8 months. Many of us are not willing to deal with ridicule for a period of several years while that person comes around. Others have no problem at all doing this and are more than happy to push and push and push. And if this is something that isn't bringing you a lot of grief and dissonance in your life, then by all means, if it works for you, it works for you. And what works for you may not work for others. Karen says, "I'm at a stage where I no longer do things to please others or make their life more comfortable. I'd rather stay at home and cook a good meal than to sit through what you did. You are brave, but true friends will understand." This is a sentiment that many people share, but that many people don't. I can say that when I first started feeling the effects of the social pressure, I was very much like, oh well, deal with it. Well, actually, at first, I was trying to change everybody's mind, and I realized that trying to get everybody in the room to agree, I see why we want that. I see that we want that so that we can go back to the period of time where the good times were rolling. We didn't have to worry about everybody agreeing on food because we already did. And if we can just get everybody to agree with us, then we can go on having fun and not worrying about it again. But the reality of the situation is that just isn't going to happen. You may get a few people in the room if you really want to work hard at it, but many people just are never going to switch to your way of eating. And so you have to decide, is putting yourself in these situations where you know you don't all agree, is it going to work for you or not work for you? And at first I decided that no matter what I felt in these situations, such as the family events that I had enjoyed for 25 years, I needed to be there. I needed to just deal with it. And it became more and more challenging. And if any of my non-vegan family members are listening to this, I hope they won't take offense, because I don't mean this in an offensive way at all. But the events where I'm still okay with being around meat are events that aren't focused, centered on the meal itself. So if there's meat at a family gathering, I probably will be fine with it, unless it's something like Thanksgiving has become very challenging for me. It was always an amazing family event where so many people come from out of town and we're all there together, and I love that part of it. But the part that's really become very challenging for me is that the meal is centered, or that the gathering is centered specifically on the meal itself, on the dead animal that's on the table. And that is really challenging for me to be around. So I'm kind of in a stage where I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to deal with those kinds of family events, the ones that are focused principally on the actual food rather than necessarily all of the other parts of just hanging out. And so, you know, I'm still struggling with how I'm going to deal with that in the future. Am I going to just not show up? I don't know for sure. But the point here is that we have to find for ourselves what is the situation that's going to work best for us in the long term, that's not going to create so much dissonance that it's painful. So, you know, some of us are going to have no problem going to the Thanksgiving dinner where there's meat on the table, and others are going to have a problem. And you've got to run that cost-benefit analysis in your head, as Dr. Lisle always says, to determine what's going to make the most sense for you. And one of the concepts that Dr. Lisle covered in one of his recent podcasts was that we have about 14 hours per day of time where we get to choose how to spend it when we're not sleeping or brushing our teeth or whatever. And that comes to about 100 hours per week, or 5,000 hours per year. And if you've got 20 years left to live, in his example, I hope I have many more years than 20 left to live, but in the example he used, he said 20 years, which is 100,000 hours. And now he said, imagine you're going to get a ding on your cell phone every time one of those hours gets spent. And there's nothing you can do to increase the number of hours that you've got. If you're going to live a whole food, plant-based diet without oil, without the animal products and junk food, you're going to exercise, you're going to get fresh air and sunlight and do everything right, you're going to get that full 100,000 hours. But there's nothing you can do that's going to get one extra hour on top of the 100,000. So now you've got to determine for yourself the best way that you're going to spend that 100,000 hours. Are some of those hours going to be unenjoyable with work or whatever? Yes, but that's going to enable you to do the things that you want to do with the rest of them. So you've got to decide, Are you going to show up to these events? Do the benefits outweigh the costs of going to put yourself in the situations like Chuck described to us at the restaurant? And you may find that if you really give it some thought, that the best scenario for you is going to be to put in the minimal amount of time necessary to those kinds of scenarios. Maybe there is a family birthday that you absolutely cannot miss, and therefore you've got to go and deal with it, and that's fine. But just understand that you're going to put your time in, you're going to get out of it the best that you can, and you're going to not show up to the ones that are really troubling you, like Chuck described. And I think this is a really common evolution to go through. You may find today that you're able to show up to those events and suck it up, and you may find 6 months from now that you're just not willing to put yourself in these same kinds of situations. I think it's very natural for us to evolve, especially as we sort of progress through on the ethical side of being vegan, as opposed to just the nutrition side or the planet side. We're all, out of those 3 core principles of veganism, I think, we aren't all going to agree on them. Many of us are in the Well Your World Facebook group because we only care about the nutrition side. Others share 2 or 3. And so I think it's important for you to understand and to really look inward to find what's going to work best for you, what's going to bring the most amount of peace. Is it going to be eliminating certain relationships? Yeah, some probably, but is it going to mean eliminating all of the non-vegan relationships in your life? I doubt it. Probably not, because these people are important to us beyond just the values that we share. This is just, there's no right answer. There's no right way to deal with this. And the comments that came from Chuck's post showed perfectly that we aren't all on the same page when it comes to how we deal with social pressure. But what does seem to be consistent is that we're all going to deal with social pressure, at least to some extent. We're all going to go through this progression of being in these situations that we don't like to a varying degree, as and will determine how we want to deal with them going forward. And I think that this is just an opportunity to showcase one of the core challenges of making this transition. So don't be alarmed. When you get beyond understanding the food, and when you get to the point where the social pressure is starting to tax you, understand that what you're going through is normal. Use the group like Chuck did. Express to the group what you're going through and what you're feeling, and get approval from them if that's what you're seeking. And listen to Dr. Lisle. Listen to Dr. Lisle's Beat Your Genes podcast. It's brought me a lot of peace through the years here as I've changed the way that I look at these situations. And watch his YouTube videos too. Dr. Lisle is the only person I know of that is really tackling the ideas of social pressure and the psychological challenges of changing your lifestyle, your diet, so that you can live the longest, healthiest amount of time that you can. Because at the end of the day, you've only got this set number of hours left, and you need to find the way that allows you to feel the greatest amount of peace as you progress through your life. And many of you watching may not be able to relate to what I'm saying because you haven't experienced these challenges yet. I assure you, if you stick with it, and if you really internalize the diet as we have and lifestyle, and you change your lifestyle to a truly health-promoting one, then you are going to be faced with these challenges. You may have a personality type to where these challenges are absolutely no big deal for you. Check out Dr. Lisle's The Perfect Personality YouTube video, where he talks about Dr. Goldhamer's perfect personality being just the right amount of disagreeable to where he doesn't care about the social pressure. It's no problem for him. Or you may be a person who really does care, and it is a problem for you, but you'll find it as you start to dig in and understand these concepts. It's really, really going to help you. It helped me immensely. I had no ability to, figure all of this out on my own. I needed the outside help. I needed the video lectures from Dr. Lisle and the podcast to really start to make sense of why I was feeling so out of place. So be at peace with the situation that you're in. Understand that there are resources out there for you. Join us in the Well Your World Facebook group, where we're just an amazing community of people that are going through really similar challenges, helping one another through it. Hopefully someday we'll be able to do some retreats where we can all get together and where the food isn't the thing that we even have to worry about. We can talk about all these other things in our lives because we're all already in agreement on the food, and that is a wonderful thing. I've been to some vegan and even an SOS-free potluck where you don't just have to talk about the food the whole time, and that is a pretty exciting feeling. So with that, thanks for listening. Please do join the Well Your World Facebook group. Subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, and head over to wellyourworld.com to check out my live cooking show. Yes, I'm calling it a cooking show now because they're not just demos. Demos, if I just call it demos, I'm only going to be appealing to the people that feel like they could get better at cooking like us. But really, we're doing a lot more in the group, in the show, than just talking about how to cook. We're talking about these concepts that I share in my YouTube videos. We're going back and forth, having a good time. So I think that even if you're already a great SOS-free cook, that you will still find value in the cooking show. So please check it out. You'll have access to all the old replays as well. Our next show is on September 1st, Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.